A career high for Terrence Edwards Jr. against California.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. And I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later on in the episode. Terrence Edwards Jr. scored a career-high 35 points in the Louisville Cardinals' 85-68 victory over California on Wednesday evening. 8th straight win for Pat Kelsey's team. We'll discuss the offensive performances from not only Terrence, but Chucky, Hepburn, and Hadley, breaking the discussion down between the first and second half. We'll talk about Reyne Smith's injury that caused him to leave the game against California and not return. We'll also discuss the lack of production from the supporting cast as we go into the final regular season game of the year. So all that coming up on this episode of the show. And the 9 o'clock tip-offs, those are brutal, man. Like, I really hope that the Cardinals don't get that 9:57 tip-off in the West region. Those games always last longer because the commercial breaks are longer and halftime seems like it lasts forever. But when you have a 9 o'clock tip-off, it just makes it so difficult to have an episode later that night because it's already getting late. So unfortunately, had a busy day on Thursday during the day. So just now getting around to discussing the California victory. My apologies on the delay, but what can you do? Speaking of delays, Louisville's offense struggled out of the gate against California. And I won't say I was nervous, but it was annoying just seeing the Cardinals miss wide open threes. And thankfully, Terrence Edwards Jr. was ready to play from the opening tip-off. Had multiple three-pointers in the first couple of minutes. He was in double digits in scoring. I mean, pretty close to that, second TV timeout he got there. Overall, he ended the evening 11 of 19 from the field, 7 of 11 from the three-point line, 6 of 8 from the free throw line for 35 points. Career high. And if it weren't for a couple of missed free throws in the second half down the stretch, we could have been talking about another 37-point performance. But hey, 35 is still pretty significant. It is the most that Terrence has scored in his collegiate career. He was the Cardinals offense in the first part of the game up until Hadley got going and Chucky Hepburn got going. And you definitely needed it because Reyne Smith went down with injury. Only played 5 minutes in that game before he seemingly came down with like a weird non-contact leg injury, which I guess is being classified as a lower leg injury. Ended up going to the locker room, coming back out to the bench, but not getting back into the game. Now, was this a precautionary measure taken by Pat Kelsey, sort of in the Boston College situation with Chucky Hepburn? It's like, hey, look, I believe in my team that we can win this game without this player, so we are going to err on the side of caution and keep this player out. We don't know. It seems like from the people that I've talked to, now granted this is all secondhand information, so don't take this as gospel, but it feels like it's a day-to-day injury and that he's going to have a chance to suit up and play against Stanford in the regular season finale on Saturday. At least that's what I've gathered, is that the Cardinals dodged a bullet. Now, I don't know if it was ankle. It looked like the calf, just the way that he came down and stepped. I didn't really worry too much about the Achilles because it feels like he would have been more immobile than that. He gingerly walked off, but he was able to make it to the bench in the second half. And it's sort of one of those wait and see moments, but more on if Louisville were to have to play without Reyne coming up in the final segment. Terrence Edwards Jr. was spectacular, and I think that he has been as good as advertised. Like, you think about when he committed to Louisville, Sun Belt Player of the Year. You're thinking, okay, this is Louisville's top scoring option, right? I mean, he was the go-to guy for a James Madison team that won a tournament game against Wisconsin. He was going to be Louisville's top scorer. Now, he's close to it, right? The only issue is that Chucky Hepburn has gotten most of the recognition on the offensive side, and Hepburn officially right now leads Edwards by 0.5 points per game as the leader in the scoring department. But you look at what he's done this year. Like, let's look at 2023-2024, 17.2 points a game in 23-24. 4.4 rebounds, 3.4 assists, shot 42%, 42.7% from the field, 34% from three, 81% from the free throw line. Turned the ball over 2.4 times a game, recorded under a block and a block and a steal per game, respectively. Really good numbers. It earned him Sun Belt Player of the Year honors. And now let's look at how that has compared to this year. And it's been more impressive because you consider the level of competition he's now going up against. He's averaging a career-high 31.8 minutes per game. Started 27 of the 30 games. 44% from the field, so that is better efficiency on marginal decrease in volume. He's shooting over one more three-pointer a game at 34.4%, so better three-point shooter, even just a small amount. 78% from the free throw line, and he's shooting significantly less free throws. That is what it is. 0.4 less rebounds, 0.8 less assists, but he's averaging 15.8 points a game. And he received a ton of criticism at the beginning of the year. A ton of it. It was loud. It was really loud. And it got to the point where, of course, I criticized him, but I was like, man, I don't really feel comfortable with how people are already writing him off just a couple games into the season. Mentioned this point once. We've mentioned it 100 times. You just got to give these players some time to gel, especially if you have a brand new team, which the Louisville Cardinals did. Edwards in ACC play has been incredible. He has been arguably from when Louisville started full ACC play against Florida State in late December to now. I mean, he's been a top 5 guard in the conference. If you want to go Chucky, Hepburn, Hunter Salas, who am I missing? I'm missing somebody significant here. Charlie knows. Oh, Chase Hunter from Clemson. I don't think that there's 2 other guards that have been playing better than Terrence Edwards. And it's not just scoring the basketball, which he's done really well, but he's been that do-it-all type player that the Cardinals need. You need a good point of attack defender? Okay, look at what he did against RJ Davis in early January. You need a guy to step in for Chucky Hepburn when he goes down to be the point guard? Okay, 27 points, 10 assists against Miami. You need a player that can go out and be the number 1 scoring option? Cool. 35 points against California. And you can bring up the whole argument. Well, if you're a Kentucky fan listening to this, first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this Louisville podcast. But secondly, it's becoming pretty increasingly on brand to just completely talk about strength of schedule and the lack of talent that the ACC has I get it. Just wait. Just wait. That's all I'm going to say. Because these guys are battle tested in tournament play, too. This is a guy in Terrence Edwards that played good against Wisconsin in a win in the NCAA tournament last year. Louisville is starting to become, dare I say, underrated. I think we're getting there, guys. I really think that we're getting there. Despite how the ACC is down, Louisville's starting to become underrated. But we need to discuss more about this California game. The end of the first half was a really good run for the Cardinals. Up and down performance. At times, you still won by 17 points. We'll get into it a little bit more when we come back on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week is the Houston Cougars. Since joining the Big 12 last season, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference games, winning the regular season title by multiple games both years. There is no team in college basketball that more capably embodies the rugged Armada than Kelvin Sampson's squad. Houston's tenacious defense leads the nation in fewest points allowed per game for the second straight season. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say, go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what the Houston Cougars have done here. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop now at nissanusa.com. I had some people texting me in the first half of the game on Wednesday night. And granted, society has become so reactionary and people get upset at things really quickly, or, it's people get too high and they get too low. And the reality is, I feel like this is my life motto, but it's a pretty commonly used mantra. Never get too high, never get too low. And especially watching sports, and I know that Louisville fans, it's been a couple of years since we've had the opportunity to watch these games and be on the edge of our seat and have something to play for at the end of the year. But it's also like, okay, guys, it's 2 minutes into the game. Relax. But it started out kind of rough for the Cardinals last night. They were going back and forth with California for the majority of that first half. This team was trailing with about 8 minutes to go. And then at that point, California didn't hit another field goal for the final, 8 minutes of the first half? It was all free throws. Credit to the Cardinals defense for stepping up and finding open shooters, which early on in the game, California was making some tough shots. They were getting to the line pretty decently. Javon Blackshear was really good at the first part. He had a team-high 22 points in this game. He and Jeremiah Wilkinson were the two guys for California, and Wilkinson was 2 of 15. You look at the top two scores, and I was impressed with this Cardinals defense because California's offense, not efficient whatsoever, but they get a good amount of second chance opportunities, and they did. Don't get me wrong. They had 20 offensive rebounds. They had 41 rebounds overall. 20 of them were on the offensive glass. That, I get it. The Cardinals were up by double digits for the majority of the second half. That cannot happen. You cannot give up 20 offensive rebounds. I don't care that it is the number one offensive rebounding team in the ACC. I don't care. You can't do it. But if there is a small piece that you can take away feeling a little bit better with, is that even when they got these second chance opportunities, they didn't really do much with them. Their top two leading scorers were a combined 4 of 26 from the field. Andrei Stojakovic, Peja's son, averaged close to 17 a game. He had 4. 2 of 11, over 4 from three-point line. Wilkinson was 2 of 15, but he made 5 of his 7 free throws. Matty Sissoko had 8 points and 13 rebounds. Rytis Petritis, I think is how you say it. I don't know. 7 points, 5 rebounds. Outside of that, California didn't really get much of a level of production from their supporting cast. So the first half ended really well for the Cardinals, yet another game in which the Cardinals led going into the intermission. They had a 15-point lead, and they didn't really look back. They got to lead the 24. California started hitting some shots, and then Louisville just kept pushing the lead further and further out of reach until the clock expired, and the Cardinals got a comfortable 17-point win. The spread was 14.5 when it opened up. I think that it ended at 13.5. So Louisville covering the spread against California. Overall, shot 53% from the field. The Cardinals did 48% from the free throw line, which is really nice. Didn't start out that way. Louisville struggled from the three-point line, and I was frustrated early on because California coming into the game 344th out of 355 teams in three-point defense. They let teams shoot about 38% from behind the arc. That's second worst in the ACC, trailing only Miami. I'm sorry, only better than Miami, I should say. And then Louisville was able to start knocking down open shots. Chucky Hepburn, Terrence Edwards was making threes. Like I said, he made 7 of them. Reyne Smith went out early in this game. So Louisville sort of just struggled from the field. And that's going to be a talking point when we go into the next segment, is that the Cardinals just have to get more production from their supporting cast. Not only next game, but moving into postseason play, because it's going to be critical. The Cardinals had 39 rebounds, so didn't get out rebounded by much, but it's the offensive rebounds that stuck out. I thought that the defense was much better in this game. You didn't give up many open three-pointers. California shot 28% from 3, which it wasn't really a great three-point shooting offense to begin with. They shot 77% from the free throw line. Louisville pretty much the same. Overall, I don't know what it is, man. Louisville might lead the league in injuries to the face this year. We know about James Scott and his injury against Miami, and he had to get the mask made by Speed School, the Hannibal Lecter Bane mask. And then he gets hit in the face again. Against California, the mask breaks, and he's got to put in a mouth guard. And to top that, Noah Waterman gets his tooth chipped. I don't know what it is. Has to lead the NCAA in injuries to the face this year. It's sort of getting ridiculous. It was sort of a chippy game as well. Like, California was playing really physical, which I am okay with. Reminds me of vintage Big East basketball. And I'm like, wow, this is a lot more physical than I thought that this game was going to be. And I'll admit it, I don't watch a ton of California basketball. I have watched a couple games this year. I watched the game against USC earlier in the year in which they won. I watched the game against Vanderbilt, and I've caught some action here and there against ACC teams, but I didn't realize how physical they were. And I think that that's good preparation as Louisville goes into postseason play. So I won't criticize too much of this. You won 85-68. My biggest concern is something that we'll talk about in the next segment, but you won by 17 points. You scored 85 points against a conference opponent. Yes, it was California, and they were 13-16. They were well below 500 in conference play, and it was a quad 3 win. But there's something to be said about handling business against a team that you're supposed to, because college basketball is so unpredictable, and we've seen quite often how teams just don't handle business all the time. So Louisville is playing the last game of the regular season on Saturday, senior day, against Stanford. And there's something that I think that we need to discuss. I don't know if I'm overreacting, but I feel like we have enough sample size to be able to discuss this much more in its entirety. We'll identify what that is when we come back on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. When we come back tomorrow, we'll preview the Stanford game. We'll discuss the Reyne Smith injury situation, what Louisville's offense could look like with and without Reyne, and then we'll also give the weekly bracketology update, all coming up on the Friday edition of the show. I'll tell you, one of my main concerns with this team in the postseason is the supporting cast production. I know that 4 different players have scored over 30 this year: Hepburn, Edwards, Hadley, and Reyne. But with Reyne sort of in a weird, it's not a lull shooting, but he's shooting so many attempts that when you see the numbers, I know the efficiency's not going to look terrible, but 0 of 2 against Cal, 2 of 5 against Pitt, 1 for 9 against Virginia Tech, 3 of 10 against Florida State, 4 of 11 from 3 against Notre Dame. It's been sort of hit or miss lately for Reyne Smith. I know that he's going to bounce out of it, but it just makes me wonder. I watched the offense at times last night thinking, okay, if it's not Hepburn, Edwards, or Hadley, who is it? And I know that you say, well, Reyne Smith, of course, but what happens when he's not knocking down his three-pointers? You saw the issues against Pittsburgh where Javon Hadley didn't score all that well, and you had to rely on Chucky Hepburn to score 37 just to beat them by 11 points. And they were leading that game with about 6 minutes to go. So when I say supporting cast, I'm really taking away Smith, Hadley, Edwards, and Chucky, and I'm looking at the rest of the rotation. James Scott, Abubakar Traore, Kenai Roots, no Waterman, even Frank Anselm-Ebe. Waterman had 6 points last night. Roots had 4. Traore had 2. And Frank didn't score. I think that if Louisville's going to make a deep run, they need more production from their bench because, Lord forbid this team gets in foul trouble like they did against Florida State and Hepburn or Edwards. Like Edwards picked up his 3rd foul in the first half last night, and thankfully he was able to escape any more foul trouble. But Hepburn had been in foul trouble the past couple of games. I think that the Cardinals just need the other players by committee to give more. I thought Noah Waterman in the first half against California played one of his better halves of the season. It wasn't really because of scoring. He had 3 points, but he had 6 rebounds and played really good defense, had a key block against the conference's best offensive rebounding team. So, I think that at the end, sorry, had to sneeze there. I think that by the end of the game, I looked at Waterman's performance. I was like, if you can get this performance from Noah Waterman every game from here on out, I think it's a good performance. I'm not asking these guys to score 10 points every game. Like, they don't have to individually all score 10 points. But there has to be some alleviation of the high scoring responsibilities of the big three, and in this situation, Reyne Smith, who hasn't been the greatest shooter as of late. I look at the bench. The Cardinals need Traore simply to play better. He played 14 minutes. He turned the ball over 4 times and had 2 personal fouls. He only played 3 minutes against Pittsburgh, had 2 fouls and 1 turnover. Against Virginia Tech, he played 11 minutes and he had 2 fouls and 5 points. And I know that he's a rotational player, but when he gets in the game, I feel like the Cardinals struggle cohesively because he turns the ball over at times. I think that we need the Virginia version of Abubakar Traore. And I don't know if it's a lack of confidence or a lack of reps or what the issue is, but I think that Louisville just needs more from Traore. They need more from him defensively. He was supposed to be one of the team's best perimeter defenders and rebounders. And at the moment, it's just sort of hit or miss on what you're going to get from Traore. And if Kadir can give you 15 minutes a night of high energy, solid basketball, maybe not even from a scoring aspect, because when I talk about the production from the supporting cast, it's not just scoring. It's maintaining the defensive intensity. It is moving the ball around. It is making the right plays. I liked what I saw from Kenai Roots against California. He had 4 points, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks in 22 minutes of action. Had to play more with Reyne Smith out. That's the first time he's played over 20 minutes since the Miami game, where James Scott went out, which was only the first time since the Ole Miss game that he's played over 20 minutes. So if he can give you, again, 15 to 20 minutes of solid defense, and another thing is just making open shots. He's getting open looks. If he can, I think at this point on the season, he's shooting, what's his 3%? He's shooting 24.5%. If you, and that's on 1.6 attempts per game, so the sample size is small, but if you can improve that just slightly to where you become a serviceable 3-point shooter, like you're improving in the margins here. I know it doesn't seem like, seismic changes, but if Waterman, Traore, Kenai Roots, Frank when he gets in, and James Scott, if they can improve just ever so slightly and play better in certain aspects, the marginal improvements add up and could be the difference between this team being a round of 64 team to a round of 32 team, or a round of 32 team to a second weekend team. It gets really, really close in postseason play. Of course, we all know that. James Scott, it's been a rough go for him the past couple of games. He's missed a couple of point-blank opportunities, some dunks, some layups. He had 6 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. I thought he was really good defending the rim. He had 3 blocks. But the past couple of games, in his past, if you look at the past couple of games, let's go back to Georgia Tech. Since February started, 2 points, 6 points, 0 points, 6 points. He had 10 against Notre Dame, which was nice, 10 and 10. He had 4 points against Florida State, 13 against Virginia Tech, really nice, 4 points, 6 points. I know that he only averages 7 a game, but the Cardinals need to get back to him being a potent lob threat, because what teams feel like they're doing at the moment is they're sort of just daring the Cardinals to shoot the ball. And they realize that, a lot of Louisville's offense at the moment is on the perimeter. And I know that Javon Hadley can be a face-up power forward, and James Scott catches the occasional lob, but I think he needs to be more involved, and he needs to finish his opportunities because, again, marginal improvements add up, and it could be the difference of winning or not winning a tournament game. Could be the difference between an early exit or somewhat of a deep run. So we'll see. I have faith in the supporting cast. Don't take what I'm saying as me saying that the supporting cast is not good enough. I think that each player has room to get back to the player that they've been at their best at random points this season. And if those guys can come together and give Louisville some really good minutes off the bench, well, you're talking about a very, very dangerous Cardinals team heading into the postseason. Cardinals back in action on Saturday for Senior Day against Stanford. We'll preview that matchup when we come back. That's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here.